Yay!
We are letting people in. It is party time. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, Jim, you're here. I love that you're here. Celebrate good times. Come on. Look deep into my eyes. This is a molecule of oxytocin. We are going
Oh,
to
that's
take
cool.
you on a journey of oxytocin. Can you see this? People have been giving me oxytocin necklaces, bracelets.
As
Hi,
people come
Dorothy. Hi, everybody. Hi, Denise. I'm so
Hi.
glad. Hi there.
Ooh.
So we have some of the people that wrote the forewords and some of the people that gave testimonials for the book here on our celebration of this book that came out on November 18th. And by the next morning, it was the #1 release in pharmacology. Yay! She blinded me with science. So, welcome to this short but sweet launch party. This is really bubbly water. Someone did bring me a bottle of champagne today. Dorothy wished me a cyber bottle of champagne, but this is bubbly water because I like it better. There's Holly. Hi, Holly. When I was sick a month ago, Holly literally sent me a cyber container of chicken soup and a blanket. I will never forget that gift. And there's Dr. Roberts, who is the medical director of the Center for Functional Medicine and the author of Return to Common Sense in Medicine, which is a fabulous book. Welcome, everybody. And I'm going to share my screen here.
I was going to say David Brownstein's here.
He
And
is David here? Oh
yeah,
my goodness, gracious. We have so many wonderful people. I really appreciate you all coming here. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of back copy of why the heck did I write this book on oxytocin medicine. I think I told David a little bit at his dining room table looking out over the lake why this was, but many of you don't know this. So I thought I would open up with how this book, one, came to birth, but it was stuck in my birth canal for the last 2.5 years. I'm so much more comfortable now that it's out. And why we're having this party, and then for you to ask any questions that you want to ask. So oxytocin is an extraordinary hormone. We think of it as a hormone that makes the uterus contract for the baby to be born and for the breast to contract for milk to let down. But the baby is entirely bathed in oxytocin during the birth process. And it also helps the gut wall contract and help it reduce the pro-oxidative event of birth. Who knew that being born was one of the most PTSD pro-oxidative events that a human being can go through? And it's one of the reasons that the baby is supposed to be drenched in oxytocin, but with the use of Pitocin with 50% of our births, and with our toxic planet, there is a question whether our babies are really drenched in as much oxytocin as is ideal. Because it turns out that we now all know estrogen and progesterone and testosterone are assaulted by endocrine disruptors. Oxytocin is the most vulnerable hormone of all to what's in our air, food, water, amniotic fluid, and breast milk. So the reason I started this journey in oxytocin is I used to work with Dr. Jerome Block, who was he was an internist. He was also a PhD in nutrition and a hematologist. He also had a radio show that I used to co-host with him a lot. In fact, here's the co-host of that radio show. He was an amazing gent. I worked with him in his office 1 week a month, like I did in Florida 1 week a month. And he worked closely with Care First Pharmacy, which was a group of two pharmacists that were very forward thinking, and we'd get together and have dinner all the time. And they had a lot of patients that were having issues with erectile dysfunctionality, and they would recommend Viagra and a wide variety of things, but they were not getting the results they wanted to get. Really, having someone respond to intimacy is not an easy deal. So the Care First pharmacist told Dr. Block and myself that if we wrote oxytocin in the prescription along with Viagra, we'd get a lot more gents being able to enjoy the act. Of course, nothing works 100% of the time, but quite a few gentlemen said they enjoyed it. And then a number of them said, I really feel like my mood is so much better. I don't need to take mood regulators anymore. And we started to get all kinds of feedback, even that some people had less irritable bowel syndrome symptoms. So we all started to broaden our vision of oxytocin. And of course, I decided, as I am wont to do, because it's not just jewelry that I'm looking at oxytocin with, but I was looking into PubMed and a lot of the research, and I discovered that there's a huge swath of which oxytocin might be helpful. Some of you who are prescribers online might have said, well, I've tried oxytocin and I haven't really gotten the benefits that it claim to fame is. So I'm going to talk to you about the many things that need to be in place for oxytocin really to be used for this potentially wide array of many issues in many tissues. So I started to work with Care First Pharmacy, and then I also worked 1 week in Oklahoma and 3 weeks at the Wiseman Family Practice Clinic, which are 5 different multi-centers in Austin trying to deliver functional medicine for insurance reimbursement, not for cash, started by Richard Wiseman and now run by his son, Jeremy Wiseman. And the first week that I was working at the Wiseman practice, while I was also going over to Oklahoma and working with the Care First Pharmacy guys and Dr. Block, one of my patients came in and she told this story, and this is why I ended up writing the book, Oxytocin Medicine. She was this very beautiful woman. She said, I gave birth to a lovely son 16 years ago, but I had a very traumatic birth. And ever since my birth, I've never been able to bond and feel emotions in the same way again. I became distant from my husband, even though I loved him. He eventually divorced me. I haven't been able to have a really great relationship with my son because I don't want him to hug me and I don't want to get hugged. And it's been very, very upsetting. I've seen a number of psychiatrists. I've tried a number of mood regulating pharmaceuticals, and I really don't know what to do. I got divorced. I've met another gentleman, and now the same thing is repeating itself. What do you think you might offer me? And I had just been having this experience in Oklahoma that some of the men that we recommended Viagra along with oxytocin were saying that their moods were new and improved. So the common dose, it's in international units in most academic studies, but there's a wide dose range, but the most common dose in much of the academic studies is 24 international units given up 1 or 2 nostrils at the same time, usually putting a little oil inside the nostrils for a day or two because it can be irritating for the first few days, and then the mucosal lining of the nose starts to acclimate. And usually the patient is given oxytocin a number of times a day because in a normal, healthy adult that's happy and connected to the world, oxytocin is pulsed out every 3 minutes. It's partially made by the action of vitamin C, and there's a number of studies that show that 3,000 grams of vitamin C helps support this pulsing of oxytocin throughout the day. So I prescribed for this woman 24 IUs in 1 nostril, 4 to 6 times a day for a month to see how she did. And I waited on pins and needles for her to come back to the clinic a month later. She walked in and she said, I just can't believe it. She had a Cheshire grin from ear to ear. And she said, I feel so much better inside myself. And with my really primary members of my family, I went and joined a yoga class where you have a couple with you, and I take my son with me part-time and my fiance with me part-time, and we've all started to have such a closer relationship. It's kind of crazy. I sat back and thought, well, what is going on here? This is extraordinary. I've got to dive deeper into this, even though not a lot of people consider using this. So I'm going to stop sharing so you can see me full on here and get the view is speaker. And then I had a patient who was a producer, a wife. She was a producer. Her husband was a producer from LA, and they had very hectic lives. She adored her husband, but there was a lot of strife in the relationship because she just didn't feel the chemical pull to connect with her husband. So she came in and she wanted to know what we might possibly do. She's been on hormone replacement therapy, and in LA, they tend to give pretty high dosages because people have to look pretty thin in front of the camera or with all of their community theatrical actor members. And she wanted to know what might be some steps we could take to have her get turned back on to her husband. So at the Karolinska Institute, in the Netherlands, they'd been working with a product called Vagifem, where they recommended up to 600 international units inserted into the vagina with a carrier cream like Versabase. And they were getting increased intimacy, increased sensation of wanting to connect in their patients, and they also found that it was an anti-aging agent for the vaginal vault, which is the name of the inside of where the penis comes in and the baby goes out. It turns out that oxytocin applied regularly, not twice a week, but regularly. They tried applying it several times a week. They tried applying it daily. Daily application after about 6 weeks would actually thicken the vaginal wall like it was when women were younger, without increasing the thickness of tumorigenic cell lines. So we think of growth as risking cancer, but it would grow the wall of the vagina thicker, younger, better, more sensitive to sensation without it increasing the risk of cancer. So I recommended that her doctor write a prescription. I showed her how to write the prescription of oxytocin vaginal cream, and she was already taking hormone replacement. So we just put that hormone replacement along with the oxytocin into her vaginal vault twice a day, BID. And I got a huge bouquet of flowers and a case of champagne a month later because she felt that the results were so rapid and they were so healthy for her relationship with her and her husband. That was early on in my practice with oxytocin. So I decided I needed to dive into the literature and find out more about this magic molecule. When I mentioned it to Dr. Brownstein, who's here tonight at our little Celebrate Oxytocin Good Time, he said, you know, I've tried it and I don't get a lot of response like that. What's the story? It turns out that oxytocin is an extremely needy hormone. It has to have a lot of other things in place for it to give you the positive benefits that you would hope to get. It's especially the three musketeers with thyroid and estrogen in both genders. So if your thyroid is not completely stabilized, people say, I took oxytocin, I tried it. It's costing a lot of money ever since COVID. It was a lot of money, a lot of effort. I didn't feel a thing. It could be that their thyroid is not ideally stabilized. And it also works hand in hand with estrogen. So estrogen and all of the three estrogens, estrone, estradiol, and estriol, need to be in balance with each other for oxytocin to work. And if you read bone dynamic literature, we all know that estrogen decreases reabsorption of bone and progesterone increases growth of bone, osteoblastic activity. We all know that testosterone increases osteoblastic or bone growth, but none of them can really benefit the bone unless oxytocin is right there in a football huddle with them, right at the level of the bone tissue. It is a total team player. Most of us never have heard that oxytocin is one of the most important factors in maintaining bone integrity so we're not at risk of fractures as we get older and especially from falls. So, oxytocin is a team player. It is a tiny little mighty peptide. It's a very small little molecule, but it has far reaching effects. We find oxytocin signals the beta islet cells and the alpha cells in the pancreas. So, of all things, oxytocin helps maintain more stable blood sugar levels, especially in people with type 1, type 2, or both diabeteses. We have somebody even at our little party today who does have both diabeteses, and she wrote a testimonial for the book, and she kept getting COVID nonstop during the pandemic. When she was on oxytocin, it's an immune enhancer. She stopped getting COVID. Ivermectin didn't help her so much, hydroxychloroquine, iodine. It was oxytocin replacement that got her free from recurrent infections. And when she ran out of it for a little while, then the COVID came back again. So it's a very extraordinary molecule. And I'm going to want to answer a lot of your questions. And first, I learned about it for erectile functionality. And then I had that experience that it changed the life of this woman in a month. And then I had the experience, especially from the Karolinska Institute, that you could anti-age the vaginal vault in a natural way without increasing the risk of tumorigenic cell lines or increasing the risk of cancer. So it's a crazy little thing because most people don't know about it. I bumped into one study where people that have severe bone cancer pain that nothing else will help got epidurals of oxytocin that eliminated the pain like IV fentanyl or hydrocodone does in the recovery room for some surgical patients. So you can take oxytocin into your body every which way. You can inhale it. That's the most common way. You can apply it topically. You can inject it. You can give it as an epidural. You can put it in the vaginal vault. There are multiple ways to get it in, and not everybody responds because you got to take a look at the football huddle members and make sure that they're all working to support each other's actions. So, Sarah, did you want to take it away for the next little moment while I have a sip of my non-alcoholic champagne?
I would love to do that. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the party. And I just want to say congratulations to Dr. Berkson, just like we all do. And I don't know how many of you use Zoom on a regular basis, but down at the bottom, she doesn't know I'm going to do this. Down at the bottom, just beside my chat button, there should be a button that says react. So I would like for you all to kind of take a look for that. And if you click on react, you'll see that there's all sorts of things you can do with that react button. Love, celebration, and I think we just need to show Dr. Berkson some love and some congratulations for her new book coming out. And a big thank you to all of you who are here to help celebrate that. And to let you know how the party is going to go, she told you a little bit about the book. Several of you have started dropping your questions in the chat. Thank you. She's got a document. She's going to start going through those questions and answering those. Closer to the end, we have a drawing for one of our a signed copy of Dr. Berkson's Oxytocin Medicine. And we'll do a random drawing for that then. All right. Have you gotten to your screen, Dr.
Yes,
Berkson?
yes, I have.
All right.
So
you see your first question there.
I do. The first question is, I have been using oxytocin nasal spray for over 2 years. Are there any long-term effects or changes in how it works that we should know about? No, because it's a naturally pulsed hormone every 3 minutes in all adults if everything is working well. So there's no adverse effects, and it should continue to give the benefits. I imagine you've been getting some benefits from it or you wouldn't keep taking it for 2 years. So it's safe to take long term. So that's really exciting. Let me know if I answered your question, because I don't think you had adverse effects. If you do, please put that in the chat. What exciting new research or delivery methods are on the horizon for oxytocin therapy? Well, the biggest one that's being utilized more and more is putting it into the vagina. You know, there's all kinds of anti-aging methods that are very expensive to try and turn back the Mack truck of time in the vagina, and regular use of oxytocin in the vagina does make the vagina like a younger vagina. Now, again, not everybody responds to it, because you got to take a look at all of the team players, but that's one of the most exciting ones. And Jim Hinseer is on the line. He is the owner and pharmacist of Las Colinas Pharmacy, that has a brand new, gorgeous facility right outside of Dallas. We lecture together a lot. He's one of my dear friends, and he is world famous in doing PTSD protocols for military. And oxytocin is extremely helpful, added to a number of other tools for PTSD. If you have any patients with severe PTSD, and especially if they're in the military, you might want to reach out to Jim Hinseer. But I helped develop, along with Jim, a protocol for treating GERD and erosive gastritis in the esophagus, and even perhaps Barrett's esophagus. And he helped me come together with a new way of taking liquid oxytocin mixed with, at that time, Mucilox, but now Creative Scripts in Naples, owned by Jerry, who I worked with quite a bit when I was in Naples, are using Mucocel. So you can take a mucus-like compounded liquid and mix it with liquid oxytocin, swallow it in the beginning 3 times a day, 15 minutes away from food or liquids, and after the first week, then take it twice a day. And it helps incredibly heal a lot of esophageal lesions. And you know, we just had a major study that came out a few weeks ago showing that women with breast cancer, what's their biggest goal? Not to get breast cancer back again. And what did they discover? That women on PPIs or proton pump inhibitors for GERD or dyspepsia, they had a statistically increased risk of recurrence and a risk of increased fatality if they did have recurrence. So we want other methods to treat this issue. We also want to test, of course, the parietal cell efficiency, because we know you can actually have too little stomach acid but feel heartburn. You can have too little stomach acid or severely too little stomach acid and have the same symptoms as if you had too much stomach acid. And much of the time, heartburn is due more to less stomach acid, but not 100%. Nothing is always 100%, only one way. The next question, do we have a little time for some kind of Yahoo here? Let's see. This is the molecule, oxytocin. It's such a fun molecule, but if I wore it on my neck with my really big microphone, you wouldn't see it. So it's really holds benefit and help often for people that don't get it from other ways. So it's always nice to have different vision and lenses with which to see ways to help our patients. Going back to the list, I am on hormone blockers for ER-positive cancer. I want a practitioner who will carefully prescribe me estradiol. If I can't have that, will oxytocin work for me with negative estrogen? So you're with negative, oh, I see what you're saying. Gotcha. You can use oxytocin, but because your estrogen is blocked, it's harder to get the same benefit from it, because estrogen is a best buddy to oxytocin. But we know from Australian researchers, I wrote about this in Hormone Deception, they said that the release of oxytocin in the breast is one of the ways we protect against cancer. So we do want our breast cancer patients to take oxytocin if they're having a lot of angst from having insufficient estrogen. But stay tuned, because the third weekend in April, a number of people who treat breast cancer and also give hormones, but in different ways at different times, we're all coming together. I don't remember the dates exactly, like 17, 18, 19. It's going to be a Thursday. It's going to be a Thursday.
It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
That's it. Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
And I'll put the dates in the comment section, and so you can go on.
And we're going to talk about, can you give hormones to breast cancer patients, and how do you do it? And how do you do it for ER positive? How do you do it for PR positive, PR negative? What do you do for triple negative? We're going to have the doctors around the world who've been diving into this, like Rebecca Glasser, who's the most published author in testosterone, and the Brownstein family. People at the Brownstein Holistic Clinic in Michigan, they are diving deeply into helping cancer patients using multimodalities, of which one of them are hormones, but they often make sure that they get the blessings of the oncologist, which often occurs if a woman says, my quality of life is just tanked out. I just cannot stand it, and I want to have hormones. There is science to support that these cancer patients can be candidates for it, but we want to make sure that there's transparency and that the patient has a team behind them. It's so harsh when patients are separated and have polemic adversarial positions from their providers. So yes, oxytocin would be helpful. The degree of help, we don't exactly know. You might want to take 3 grams of vitamin C. Normally, a food like dates helps promote more oxytocin naturally, but we wouldn't want to recommend that for a cancer patient because they're so sugary, and cancer loves sugar, even if your oncologist doesn't believe it. So it is a little bit of a squirrely situation with someone who is on estrogen blockers, just to let you know that. Going down a little bit more, I'm 42, but on hormone blockers for ER positive cancer. That's interesting. Usually a younger woman will be on tamoxifen. I want a practitioner who will carefully prescribe me estradiol. Well, you'll want a practitioner who's going to be educated by our 20-hour CME, Everything Breast Cancer in High-Risk Women, that's coming up in April 2026. It is honestly groundbreaking. It's extremely exciting. I'm excited to have Paul Merrick talking about repurposed drugs, have Rebecca Glasser talking about the use of testosterone, having Jeffrey Dash, who's just written one of the best treatises of the science behind hormones. We're having Jesse Brownstein. We're having Haley Brownstein. We're having David Brownstein. We're going to dive into the world of how we treat. It's nothing about prevention. It's just treatment. And we'll have about 30 case reports from about 10 doctors who've all been, or providers, might be a nurse practitioner. We love our nurse practitioners who have been treating breast cancer patients for at least 3 years with hormones. So there's a lot coming on the horizon. Remember, we have been the people saying that women shouldn't be denied hormones. And now the 27th head of our FDA, Dr. Makari, has just removed the black box warning of estrogen. They say, yes, estrogen is so protective. Most of us die from heart disease. It reduces the risk in younger women of heart disease by 66%. It gives women an average increase of 3.5 years of health span, but they make it sound like older women, if you're in your 70s, you've missed out. You can't go on hormones. It's the same old thing. We are now going to start helping to disperse the confusion that's out there about older women not being able to get access to hormones, and how do you give an older woman hormone so that when they haven't been on them for 10 years, there is for 1 year a slight increase in risk, and how do you deal with that? And it turns out that the next year, the benefit skyrockets again, and we don't want those older women missing those skyrocketing benefits. There's so much confusion. I belong to the International Institute of Bioidentical Hormones, spearheaded by David Rosensweet, one of the true leaders in hormones today. I was lucky enough to have him as one of my physicians over 30 years ago when I had breast cancer, and now we're both in the hormone field. And every Wednesday afternoon, he gives grand rounds. And just yesterday, he had Jerry Lynn Pryor, who's one of the major researchers in women's hormone health for the last 4.5 decades. I think she's about my age. And she was showing that we have known in research that birth control pills block normal ovulation when women are on them. It's very risky whether they get back to normal regulatory ovulatory cycles, that birth control pills reduce bone integrity, and 3 years out, only a percentage of that is regained. They are dangerous on the health when often micronized bioidentical progesterone could be used. But what do we hear OBGYN doctors saying now all over the internet, on Instagram and on TikTok, because everybody wants to be famous and rich and have these answers that nobody else has? They're promoting birth control pills to be given to 40 and 50-year-old women for hormone replacement, as though there were no negative side effects. So we're going to answer a lot of those questions and everything hormones in high-risk women. And we understand that there's so much confusion out there, and we hope that our work will help contribute to reducing that confusion and allowing women to get access to life-protecting and resilient protocols like bioidentical hormones, and even for breast cancer patients. First of all, there's no reason a triple negative breast cancer patient should ever be denied hormones. There's no receptors. So we'll be going into all of this in depth, and we hope that it will be reaching out its warm arms to the women around the globe, because there's way too much confusion and actually way too many lies. Makari's brand new book called Blind Spots, Where Medicine Got It Wrong and What This Means for You, the second chapter, it's incredible. He's the head of our FDA, and it's been bothering him for 25 years that June 28th, 2002, they were all heads of the Women's Health Initiative. He was one of the co-authors, and Jacques Rousseau was a primary investigator, and he called a meeting together of all the co-authors, including Makari, and he said, we're going to put out a release that hormones, in particular estrogen, cause breast cancer and heart disease. And all the co-authors said, we didn't reach statistical significance. And he said, dissension will not be accepted. If you go against me, you'll lose your career. And he sent out the news release that was a lie, a total lie. I was asking David the other day, why do you think he did it? Because people want to be famous and they want to be rich. The next week, the Journal of the American Medical Association came out with a summary, since they stopped the studies, the two arms of the hormone study, prematurely, and they said no statistical significance was reached. And yet they stopped teaching hormones at med schools, osteopathic schools, and naturopathic schools, and everybody's fearful that hormones cause cancer. It's the Wild West out there, but everybody talks to you like they know exactly what's going on, and they're quite arrogant about their position on it. Many OBGYNs are trained by the Menopause Society. If you go to their meetings in September in Chicago, the first few slides say our partner liaisons. Thank you, Novartis, Merck, all Bayer, all the other drug companies. They are supported by the drug companies, so they support the synthetic drug hormones. It's very hard to really get your finger on the accurate science. And that's what myself and my beloved colleagues, we're in this to try and really help women. That's what we're honestly trying to do. That's what this book, Oxytocin Medicine, is also trying to do. Next question. But I'm going to take a sip of my alcohol-free champagne. I found Vagital from Karolinska in my research. It was, I think it was called Vagifem. Was it called that before being called Vagifem? I'm not really sure. So that would be interesting to see the lineage of the name, but I don't know. Which way do you think is the best way to administer oxytocin, nose or vagina? Is it topical, vaginally, or inserted? All delivery modes, which is how you get a hormone into you, are based on the woman's needs and her own body. Some women do better with vaginal delivery. Some women do better with nasal for other issues. But usually, if you're trying to have an effect on the vaginal vault or the uterus, you'll want to deliver it with the first vaginal pass. That's what you call inserting something into the vagina. And it could be put in on a cream. It could be put in on an MBK pellet. It can be put in on a pearl. There's a wide variety of ways that it can be used, but the delivery mode depends on the patient and the problem that the patient is presenting in the office and discussing with you. The dosing for men and women, the average dosing is 24 international units, anywhere from 4 to 6 times a day, but it can go very low in children where it's being used for ADHD and autism. They found the lower dose in kids work better, like 8 international units in kids, and it could be used in higher dosages for larger patients or for different issues. For example, oxytocin mixed with ketamine as a nasal spray is a very rapid treatment for major depressive disorders. It's extraordinary. Nothing works for 100% of the people. And as we know, oxytocin is even more so that way because it's such a team player that needs magnesium and vitamin C and thyroid to be working and estrogen to be in optimal levels. But sometimes that ketamine oxytocin nasal spray treatment needs to be at a much higher dose. So when I worked at the Oklahoma clinic with Dr. Block, he sometimes gave 80 international units several times a day. And certainly for larger patients with all things from vitamin D to coenzyme Q10 to oxytocin, the larger the patient, the more the fat cells solubilize the whatever you're giving to them, and you need to double or triple your dose. And this is well described in the literature, especially for fat-soluble vitamins, but it also can be extrapolated to oxytocin. Any plans for an upcoming conference on oxytocin? Well, I'm going to wait and see if Dr. Brownstein's starting to get some results in his practice. Will it be included in the Everything Gut Conference? It will be included in the Everything Gut Conference. We're hoping to have Everything Gut with Dr. Sam Rabar and Jill Carnahan in November. I hope everything is okay with them. I was sending out emails and we haven't quite connected yet. But because oxytocin has, along with vasopressin, which is one of its also other best friends, it has receptors all along the mouth to the south. So you can use oxytocin for a wide array of issues as an antispasmodic, an anti-inflammatory, for leaky gut. And there's a number of Danish researchers that have done a lot of research on the gut and oxytocin, and they were very kind to talk with me in the middle of the night because of our timing issues and write email after email, and that's part of what I used in the gut section of the book. So I make a case that the baby is supposed to be drenched in oxytocin at birth to welcome it to planet Earth, to want to be a great member of society, a peaceful, connecting member of society, because oxytocin is supposedly connecting hormone. That's why it's released during orgasm. Women release more during orgasm, so guys can have friends with benefits, but women can say, I want friends with benefits, but they release so much oxytocin, they often really get quite attached to the man that they're supposed to stay friends with and not get so emotionally attached to. Oxytocin is a way that the baby is supposed to come into a world that's embracing them and that they want to be unified. Today's world is anything but. We have kids going into schools, shooting everybody up. We've got people triggered. I can't believe that Kennedy, Makari, Bhattacharya, they're all trying to find out why our kids are sick and other people are vilifying them. I make a few comments here and there and I get almost like death threats, but really negative email that I've never received before in my life. This is a world devoid of oxytocin because it's very sensitive to endocrine disruption more than even estrogen and testosterone. So I make a case that the oxytocin in the world is not working like it used to work. We do know that Pitocin, of which 50% of births in the United States, the moms and babies are now exposed to Pitocin. And it's not pulsed. It's continuous through an IV. And quite a number of forward-thinking gynecologists have been taking a look at the children's emotional health over time that are born to the women given Pitocin at birth. And there's a number of well-run studies that show that women given Pitocin and the babies born to them have a shocking increase, 200 to 400% increased risk of ADHD and autism. We know we're looking at vaccines, but this kind of thing is multifactorial. So if we no longer have the same amount of oxytocin, which is the embracing hormone on this planet, what can we do about it? What should we do about it besides reduce the amount of chemicals and toxic endocrine disruptors in our air, food, water, amniotic fluid, and breast milk? But oxytocin is supposed to flush the baby and help give it a good unified vision at the start. And that is no longer what is happening. So I make that case, but then I go through each chapter. How could you as a practitioner and you as a patient consider the use of oxytocin? It's an appetite adaptogen. So you can use it with anorexia or use it with obesity. If you've got blood sugar issues, you can use it in those patients. If you've got gut issues, you can use it in those patients. If you have pain issues and PTSD issues, you can use it in those patients. And the 12th chapter is a list of how to write the scripts for about 25, 30 conditions directly to be sent to the compounding pharmacists, who, by the way, I wouldn't be who I am or alive today without the incredible field and the incredible colleagues that I have in the industry and field of compounding pharmacists. So I dedicate this book to them. And my publisher and editor didn't want me to do it. They say, you can't dedicate the book to a profession. You got to dedicate the book to a person. And I said, no, I really would not be who I am today without compounding pharmacists. So I did dedicate this book to them, and that is how it unfolded. Is the nasal spray helpful for PTSD or for traumatic brain injury? And if so, what dosage do you recommend? Once again, it depends on the patient, it depends on their size, and it also depends on the degree of severity of their presenting issue. But right after a traumatic brain injury, even a stroke, we like to give very high dose progesterone, melatonin, and oxytocin, and possibly sex steroid hormones, which all seem to help decrease the area of the infarct, the damaged area, and allow the patient to heal faster, better, with less complications downstream. And usually those doses depend a lot on the size of the patient and the severity of that presenting. So it could be anywhere from 24 IUs 6 to 8 times a day to 80 IUs to 6 to 8 times a day. What labs are necessary to determine oxytocin effectiveness? Well, Meridian Laboratory, started by Jonathan Wright but sold recently to another owner, is the only lab that I know clinically that will run oxytocin either by itself or in an ultimate sex steroid panel, where you can get it with all of the other sex steroids and quite a bit of other information, like even growth hormones and some organic acids, and 24-hour evaluation with a full 24-hour collection of urine is one of the gold standards of testing hormones, but not the only way. Dr. Brownstein and I taught how we both use serum testing, but you always need to do serum testing along with urine testing, no matter what you do, because you have to take a look at other things in the blood like FSH and LH and sex hormone binding globulin. So you never get away from needing some blood labs along with any other way that you're running hormone labs. But all of this is hugely debated by different experts in the field, and they all have their reason of why they do things. But measuring the level of a hormone does not tell you its functionality of that hormone. I want to say this again because we all measure a hormone, and then as providers, we up or lower the dosage we're giving to a patient, thinking the level is guiding our clinical acumen. But really, the hormone has to be able to disassociate from the Uber that it drives around in the bloodstream in. And if you have elevated sex hormone binding globulin, which is in essence its analogy of an Uber, the more sex hormone binding globulin you have, it can't get out of the Uber and get into that evolutionarily conserved binding pocket domain. So you have to have a binding pocket domain that the hormone can open the door, get out of the Uber, and get in. You need zinc to pull it into that binding pocket domain. And in the binding pocket, it's got to be empty so the hormone can nestle in and they can shimmy in space, delivering the signal. So if we're filled with plastics and heavy metals and glyphosate and tributylin that used to be painted on the bottom of ships, many of the endocrine disrupting compounds, but especially bisphenol A, they sit inside the binding pocket. And even though you measure perfect levels in the blood, the hormone can't get in. It's kind of like being on an airplane and you really got to pee. And you go to the front of the plane and all the toilets say occupied. And you cross your legs and scurry on down to the back of the toilet and it says occupied, and you can't get in anywhere. And if the binding pocket domains are filled with chemicals, endocrine disrupting chemicals, you can have perfect level labs, but your binding pocket domain isn't functional. And you also need vitamin A, iodine, magnesium, and a number, especially the active form of B6, pyridoxal 5-phosphate. You need a plethora of nutrients all hovering about this binding pocket to make everything work. So hormones are a tapestry, but they're not thought of that way. And almost everybody just measures a level and then gives you more guidance on up or down. And recently, in the last 6 or 7 years, we discovered that hormones don't need receptors all the time. They can signal all membranes, and every cell has a lipid layer surrounding it, a membrane made of fat, and hormones now can signal fat. So hormones can signal the binding pocket and hormones can signal fat, but if we eat a highly processed, an ultra processed diet with a lot of trans fatty acids and we don't have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, our hormones don't work. So hormones are a big deal. And I write all about this in a way that I hope you will read it as an enjoyable journey to give you an explanation of how hormones work that very few people know about. The father of gynecology, Leon Spiroff, in his books, he hinted on all of this because hormones are this bigger picture, and they're the most powerful signaling molecules we have, but they're not respected that way, even though the father of gynecology, he himself did. So from Karen, you have 18 more questions. You mentioned that it's expensive. Well, I was a little bit shocked to see, I was looking online, everything is going up at a fast pace. It used to be that oxytocin cost about $60 a month. And now I think it's probably going to be costing about 100, depending on how much you need, but it's usually going to be costing 100 plus a month. And does it help with libido if a person is also on estrogen and progesterone? Yes, it does. does. It does help with libido. Would vaginal oxytocin help with lichen sclerosis? Yes, it does, but especially with great progesterone. But it would be a great helper for lichen sclerosis. That's a great question. Estriol intravaginal lotions also rejuvenate the vaginal wall. I haven't really, I know that they make things juicier. I haven't seen research that they actually thicken and enlarge the columnar mucosa in vaginal walls, but I could be wrong. I might not know that research. So whoever sent that in, could you send me a study that supports that? I would love to see that. Are estriol and oxytocin additive? Yes. Estriol is an estrogen and they're synergistic would be more of an accurate way of putting it. Great question. And if you've got the study behind that, I would love to see it. And you can send it to admin@drlindsayberkson.com. If Pitocin is used in labor, how does it affect the baby in regards to emotional development? Where the studies where they're looking at that say that it damages the emotional development of babies exposed to Pitocin in the womb. So there is this question. People are looking at it. Studies have been done, and they do say that there is more tendency to depression and emotional instability. Great question. I've been using oxytocin nasal spray for over 2 years now. Are there any? We already answered that question. Will it help with vaginal dryness? It certainly does. It synergizes with the sex steroid hormones. I experienced spotting with taking 5 mils of oral oxytocin. Have you seen this? Wow, that's really interesting. We do when we give vaginal hormones, if the woman still has a uterus, it is a little play of spotting and it gets harder to control it. I have not seen that at all. So it might very well be that the patient needs to take more progesterone. Most of the time when you're bleeding or spotting, not always, but most of the time, your balance between estrogen and progesterone is off where you need more progesterone. No, I'm not going to go to that question. I have a pro group, and somebody in Seattle said they gave patients 25 milligrams of progesterone and they shortened their period and were having some issues. And Dr. Jerry Lynn Pryor said that's like a drop in the ocean. If you don't give enough of a hormone, you can get issues. You need to get to the right dose of a hormone to not get issues. And I love that. And Carol Peterson at our talk in Everything Hormones was also really stating that if you underdose a hormone, you can create some problems, and you might need to increase the dose to eliminate those problems and address why you were taking the hormone in the first place. Let me say that again so you grok that. Remember Richard Heinlein and the concept of grokking something, of getting it into your cells. If you give insufficient amounts of a hormone to treat a problem, you can create another problem. So you need to taper up to get to a better optimal dose to eliminate that initial problem by giving too little hormone. You need to up your hormone to try and eliminate the initial issue. I hope that you were able to grok that.
Some reactions going on here. So
yeah, what is it?
The hearts and thumbs up and everything. So they did. You got an amen, and thank you for adding dosing protocols. You got a confetti of hearts, all sorts of exciting stuff happening.
Oh, cool. I can't see that when I'm looking at the sheet with the question. Thanks, Sarah.
They are loving you. So, and we do have a few more questions, and then we will get to our first drawing.
Well, why don't we stop the questions here and do the first drawing, and then we'll go back to the questions.
Well, Karen and I are in the middle of getting everybody's names into the thing to spin it.
So, okay. How do you determine who needs this and what dosage and delivery method are most appropriate? Well, we've kind of been talking about that. As you read the book and you see the bandwidth of how it can be used, that will give you an understanding when a patient presents themselves, or if you're a patient yourself, if this might be useful for you. And the book is written like that. It first gives you the philosophical understanding of the baby being drenched in oxytocin and the theoretical philosophical ramifications of that, and also the studies that show that women born babies born by Pitocin birth have been now shown to have more issues in a variety of tissues. And then I go by each set. So I show how you can use it for the gut, how you can use it for the esophagus, how you can use it for pain, how you can use it for bone health and muscle health, etc. So when you have patients, after you read the book, you'll be able to identify what you should consider using oxytocin replacement therapy on. And remember, it's sold over the counter in 15 international units. It's so safe, like progesterone, that the government, in its wisdom, has made it available for anyone to put it into anything up to 15 international units. But we don't know if we're getting it online and here and there and everywhere, if it's standardized, etc. So when I was in Oklahoma, the Care First Pharmacy boys like Brad Whitehouse and myself, we all got together and formed a company. We were really excited, and we formed a 15 international unit product. I think it was called Oxy Spray, and we started to sell it, and it was a big seller right out of the chute. And 3, 4 months later, the FDA made it illegal for compounding pharmacies to ship across state lines if they didn't also have a current license in that state for that year, which they had to reapply for and pay for every year, which stopped a lot of the cross-country mailing of from one compounding pharmacy to another state. Like I used to get 2-methoxyestradiol, a final metabolite of estrogen from Key Pharmacy in Washington. But right after that law came out, they couldn't ship it to Texas. So I had to get it from Texas. And then I got it from Jim Hinseer, who's been very helpful for me. So it's so safe that it's available over the counter. And but there's uses that you need to start getting a basic understanding of how it would help. And then also the patient, the severity, how long they've had it, and their size all have to go into the decision. People often ask as though there's a cookie cutter answer, a recipe that applies to everybody. And that's old hat, old medicine. In functional medicine, you treat the patient, you figure out what's at their root basement level of why they're ill. You decide what you want to do. You might want to run an oxytocin urine test with Meridian Laboratory, or you might just try it based on their presenting symptoms, and then you start understanding it. But the book will take you by the hand and help you make a lot of these decisions, even if you're a layperson and it's so safe you can do it on your own. Remember, it has to be refrigerated. When it doesn't need to be refrigerated when it's sent to you, although ideally compounding pharmacists do refrigerate it, and you don't get that when you buy it from Walmart or from other salespeople. Walmart was selling a form of oxytocin. I don't remember the name of the product, but I was a keynote at a pharmaceutical conference in Calgary, Canada, talking on oxytocin. And there were a number of gynecologists there who said during COVID, they couldn't get a hold of Pitocin, and half of their births were assisted with Pitocin. So they started using oxytocin from Walmart in Canada. And it worked so well when they were able to get access to Pitocin again, they didn't want it anymore. And when I spoke with them, they were still using Walmart oxytocin, although just this month, Walmart has stopped selling oxytocin. Just when I spoke about it in the book that it was available in Walmart, it isn't available anymore. So I went and looked online. I just found this out a few days ago. And the price of oxytocin was a little bit shocking to me. You know, some of the Walmart was selling it for, I think, $26 or $36, and now people are selling it for $136. So things change. We're in an inflationary time, of course, and everything is going up. I just paid a big dental bill this morning. How do you determine who needs this and what dosage? So you can measure it, you can read the book and go through the different chapters, understanding the different routes of how it applies to a patient. I suspect that one of the reasons I feel great after a sauna is from a boost in oxytocin. Have studies measured oxytocin after sauna? What a great question. I don't know. I'm going to now have to dive. I do not know the answer to that. How does it compare to a nasal dose? No idea. But you know, saunas increase your circulation too. Oxytocin and the mucocell for Barrett's. So read the book, read the chapter in the book. It goes into it. And if you have questions, you can call up Creative Scripts, Jerry or Johnny at Creative Scripts, because they also mix it together with a local anti-inflammatory agent. I always have trouble pronouncing it, busanamide, and we've kind of, that prescription is in the book, and they have been reversing Barrett's esophagus. But Dr. Sam Rabar, who's one of the world famous functional gastroenterologists, he tells me that a lot of radiologists misinterpret Barrett's, that it's much rarer than we think, and a lot of times it's just really a state of a lot of cell change, but not truly Barrett's. And I discuss his discussion, Dr. Rabar's discussion about all of this in that gut chapter in the book, and it's kind of a little bit too much to go into. But we're made to think that people should live on proton pump inhibitors if they're diagnosed with Barrett's. He says there's a lot less Barrett's diagnosis. When he looks at the radiology report, he says many radiologists read that report wrong. And I've just had a personal experience with doctors and radiologists reading things wrong. You can no longer totally trust everybody who's given you information, even radiologists. So please read that chapter. It's kind of in depth and a little bit over the head of going into more detail at the moment.
All right, I want to jump in because we have our first winner.
Okay.
So our first winner is Cecilia Fountain. So yay, Cecilia.
What a great name, Cecilia Fountain.
Autographed book from Dr. Berkson. What I need you to do is in the top up there, you'll see a little section above the chat. There's a plus sign, says new chat. Send me your name, your address, and a phone number and email privately in that chat, or you can just email it at admin@drlindsayberkson.com, but easier to just drop it in the chat, and then we'll do another drawing in just a few minutes.
And that's fantastic. And by the way, you have a beautiful name, but realize that I have to order books tomorrow. I don't have any books in my hand yet, and I have to have the book to be able to sign the book. So just give yourself, don't think you're going to get the book in a few days, because I can't ship you a book via Amazon. I'm going to have to order some books. I didn't have them yet. It only came out 2 days ago, even though it was first top release in pharmacology within 12 and a half hours. That is so exciting. That is orgasmic. I felt like I took 150 international units of oxytocin. Wahoo! Okay, we'll finish the questions here, and we're almost ready to call this an evening. We have several Barrett's patients. What is he contact information for the pharmacist that can compound the liquid? It's Jerry at Creative Scripts in Naples, Florida. And I worked closely with them for a 4-year contract that I had at Dr. David Perlmutter's old clinic. The medical director, Dr. Roberts, who's one of incredible doctor, she's on this call right now too. And she also knows how to write the script, but we were getting it compounded, and they have now worked with quite a number of doctors in the local area dealing with this, mixing oxytocin with a number of other constituents. So GI doc told the Barrett's patients they had to be on PPIs for the rest of their life. That's exactly right. But do they? That's exactly wrong. They probably do not. Doctors tell patients a lot of things that they think is really accurate and really good for the patient, but it doesn't mean that every single fearful thing that you are being told is really contains a true pearl of accuracy. Does taking oxytocin with mucocell mean that they have to take PPIs? Nope, they do not have to take the PPIs. That's the bottom line. They don't have to do that, but you have to be followed up with a post-endoscopic exam so you know, are you reversing the issue? And you might want to have a second radiologist, or maybe send the films to Dr. Sam Rabar at the LA Center for Gastroenterology and Nutrition in Century City, which is right next to Beverly Hills, and say, what would you charge me for reading these films and really confirming whether these patients have Barrett's? That's what I would do now from the future moving forward. Okay, we have a few more questions. I don't want to belabor it because I know everybody's been working hard. Funny question, but does using oxytocin make you want to bond with everyone that maybe you don't want to bond with? I don't really think so, but that's an interesting question. But no, I don't think you're going to suddenly be drawn to very nasty strangers, I think is kind of the question. Interesting question. You have a very interesting mind, whoever asked this. Also, I've started estrogen, progesterone, and trying to get balanced. My doctor is open to some topical progesterone. What form do you recommend if it's compounded into a cream? Well, it's really, that's what bioidentical testosterone is. You can get it as a cream, you can get it injectable, you can get it vaginal. You can get hormones into you in many different ways. And part of the first year of the journey is trial and error to find out which way works best for you, your body, and your physiology. SSRIs cause people to fall out of love. Is this because SSRIs deplete oxytocin? If so, can you prescribe oxytocin along with SSRIs? That is a really great question, and I don't know the answer to that either, but I know a lot of medications can deplete oxytocin, especially when they futz with neurotransmitters in the gut. You can try giving oxytocin with SSRIs. It's not contraindicated, and you can see if I know that people have less affect when they get when they go on the serotonin uptake re-inhibitors, and they have a harder time orgasming, they have a harder time with sensation of emotions, and there's no reason that oxytocin replacement would be contraindicated with that. But most of my patients are not on these medications, so that is not something that I have a lot of experience with. Will oral oxytocin work for patients with PTSD? Yes, very, very well. And it's usually delivered by nasal spray. Is there a test for oxytocin level? Meridian Laboratory is the only lab I know that does have it. It has it either just as solo oxytocin testing or as part of an ultimate sex steroid 24-hour analysis. But it's a urine test. Vaginal dose for persistent dryness despite BHRT. Well, the dose would be anywhere from 100 international units BID up to 600 international units BID. And you can read the chapter. There's a chapter on vaginal use and sexual functionality in the book. I'm wondering if this can be used for someone with a thyroid condition. Yes, it can. The thyroid and oxytocin naturally work together in the body. Can you get oxytocin over the counter? Yes, you can, but you can get it up to 15 international units. Can oxytocin possibly help with traumatic brain injury 20 years after the event? It's certainly worth a try. There's no reason not to try it, and it doesn't have dangerous potential effects, so you can try it with peace of mind. Do you have to stay on oxytocin indefinitely, or that way you'd have to try it on yourself and see if you get the benefit, and after a period of 6 months to a year, you go off of it. If the issues come back, but you were better on it, you can go back on it. If you go off of it and the issues stay away, you successfully got rid of part of the root cause of your issue. Do you know if oxytocin would help narcolepsy? Well, several of the pharmacies that now utilize oxytocin in compounding have pharmacists that work at their facilities that have narcolepsy, and they have tried oxytocin and it did not help that. So that's a very small little N of maybe 4 people, but at this point in time, that wouldn't be something that I would be grabbing or to write a prescription for somebody with narcolepsy. How long does oxytocin last in the refrigerator? Great question. It lasts between 3 and 5 months. So you really want to get it, open it up, put it in the refrigerator, and then use it up and buy it every few months, not buy a year's supply at a time. If I'm trying to treat someone's GI with oxytocin orally, will also their mood disorders or this is kind of or do they also need the nasal spray? Sometimes you have to give oxytocin just like you do with hormones. Sometimes we give women oral progesterone at the same time we give them vaginal progesterone, or at the same time we give them topical progesterone. This is up to the provider. The more the provider knows, the more they can help in these diverse ways. The less the provider knows, they're limited by their not knowing these things. That's why I always end my morning substacks called Agile Thinking with the mantra, knowledge is power. This is really true. Back to you, Sarah.
We have our second winner, and just taking me a minute to get back on screen. So drum roll, please, with your little oxytocin bit. There we go. So our second winner tonight is Ricky Waddell. So congratulations, Ricky.
Yay.
Yay. And let me do this little thing right here because I have some exciting news. If I can get it, I will share my screen. There are other ways, because those are our two book drawings tonight. But there are other ways to win, and that is for the next through the middle of December. I don't know that we really ever said the date, but December 18th, because that would be 1 month that the book has been out. December 18th. If you take a picture, you order a book, take a picture, and tag Dr. Berkson on social media, you get an entry. Or if you write an Amazon
right,
review,
you know how reviews promote awareness and sales. So we would love to have you write a review.
If you write a review on Amazon and then just let us know by emailing us, that is an entry. And what we are drawing for is a 15-minute conversation with Dr. Berkson in January of 2026. That's an exciting thing. So definitely it helps us out, and it would be a wonderful thing to get to win. And we do hope you enjoy the book. So Ricky, if you will let me know in that private chat your information, that would be great. And just like Dr. Berkson mentioned earlier, you'll have to get the book, sign it, and then we'll get it out to you. But we'll let you know it's on the way.
Yay.
Several of you have asked about a replay. It will go up later this week. We'll tweak a few things and it will go in the Agile Thinking webinar section, but we will email you with that link so you can go directly there once it is available.
I want to thank Sarah for all her creativity and support, and Karen for all her creativity and support, and for those on here that have written their experience that I was able to publish in the book, and for Jim Hinseer and his support. And I hope Jim and I do a lot more things in the future. And of course, to the Brownstein clan, who are one of the smartest families we have in the United States today. And I'm very, very grateful to be part of them. And so wonderful that we can have this fun little online launch. Because, I worked with the nephrologist who first developed what became Zoom. Dialysis has to take place 3 times a month, and he had a dialysis center in Midtown Austin, and I worked with him at that dialysis center for 8.5+ years. And then he also had a dialysis center in Giddings. So 6 days a week, he was at a dialysis center from early morning to late night. And Giddings is about 60 miles away from Austin, and it was driving him crazy. So he got in touch with AT&T. He got a grant. They dug a cable, and they laid cable from his computer in his Midtown dialysis center to his computer in Giddings, Texas, and they were able for him to oversee the dialyzed patients in Giddings without him having to drive there 3 days a week. And he realized this was the future of medicine. He went to Bush, who was governor of Texas, and he said, we should write this into a law. They legalized it. If you walked into his dialysis center, there were pictures of him and Bush signing that law all along the hallway when you walked into his office. And here we are able to have a book launch party because Jack Moncrief came up with the idea of connecting his 2 dialysis centers together. It's really amazing how information and ideas happen. And now we have an idea of oxytocin. We're expanding our experience and knowledge of hormones. And it's always growing and growing for your benefit and for providers' benefits to have bigger tool bags to help more and more patients. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here, and go home and have a lovely evening. God bless everybody. May the oxytocin force be with us. Night, night.